Alright, this is our second reactor tutorial video. Today we are going to show building a breeder reactor. Now this will be a basic breeder reactor with automation. There's probably way more crazier you can do, but this should get you a basic start. So, as with most reactors, you're going to want a heat exchanger and you need some sort of coolant. The only one you don't need that for would be the steam distilled water, which would be a turbine instead.
The reactor will also be super critical, which is very useful for breeders, so the breeding doesn't take like hours.
Alright, so you're actually going to show not only how to do a breeder, but a super critical breeder. Okay.
It's quite a small and bit wasteful design, but it should work.
You can get up here a little higher so I can see what you do in here.
So this block is where we will put our breeder rod. It will get neutrons from this reactor block, where there will be one supercritical fuel rod. And this reactor rod will just have a reflector and this absorber.
Okay. And we're heating this with CO2, which will give us out hot CO2.
And we're doing this with CO2 because it has a special property. You can see in the tooltip of the fuel rods, it makes the factor go a little bit higher. And that allows us to use uranium-235 to create a supercritical breeder reactor. Because in a carbon dioxide reactor, it has a factor of 1/3. That means it has to be adjacent to 3 reflector rods to be supercritical. That leaves one rod, one side open for the breeder rod. I think I will just.
And there's two types of breeding rods. There's a thorium and a uranium. The thorium breeds uranium-233, and the uranium breeds plutonium-239.
Yes, and the fuels you get from breeding are actually a bit more powerful than your regular fuels. They last a bit longer and are quite good. And when you actually breed your first uranium-234, we are going to breed thorium here, you can actually use that to breed another. So this is a self-contained cycle. You just need the thorium, which is easy to get.
Not as easy as it used to be because thorium got taken out of coal, but still easy to get.
Easier than
Easier than uranium,
plutonium.
Yeah.
I need the pickaxe, so I can.
Oh, here you go.
Blocks. Thank you. Just making sure that the reactors get properly cooled with liquid before we insert the rods, so there won't be any mistakes.
Always good to make sure there's no mistakes. Now, just need to check our connections, make sure everything's connected.
Wiring's gonna be a bit of a mess.
Now, from the last one, you'll remember that the red side of these is the output. So these two, this is the output line that he's running here. And the blue side is to output cold coolant to an adjacent block, not an input. Input is any side that does not have the colored circle. Because the blue side will output half of its coolant if it is full, which a reactor can hold 64 millibucket or 64 buckets of coolant, no matter which coolant it is. Alright, so this is your input line here. There you go. Now you're getting some movement in the pipe at least.
Up now.
Looks like we're going to need some more CO2 up here. And like we said in the last one,
They are full. CO2 is actually not visible if you use think.
oh, you
Another
actually
mod in
can't
the
see it?
No, in a normal only GregTech 6 environment you can see it. But
Oh, okay.
another mod adds it and it makes it invisible. So
That stinks.
yes, always have a looking glass to actually check if you have CO2 in those.
And again, we would be using regular GregTech tanks. We're only using the open block ones for, ease of setup here. If I was doing this normally, I would have a large GregTech tank full of CO2 sitting here to fill it. I don't actually recommend using the open block tanks like we are here because this will get very laggy. Speaking of, let me have the pickaxe back real quick and I will get rid of these so they're not overfilling our pipe here when we start the reaction, because that's something you definitely don't want to do. Then the heat exchanger will not be able to put out its coolant or cold fluid, and therefore it won't be able to take in any more hot. So the hot will back up into the reactor and then things go bad. Then you're going to have a bad day.
So we put this uranium here, surrounded by 3 reflector rods, and now if we were to start this reactor, it will go supercritical. We can test this quick. And you can see the neutron count rises and will go on indefinitely.
Okay.
But we don't want that because it would explode after some time. So
Yeah.
we actually have to regulate this. This can be done rather easily with a bit of redstone.
And again, from the last one, always make sure when you're messing around with the reactor that you have a universal hazmat suit on, because if you touch the reactor, you will take heat damage, and there is radiation in an area depending on what fuel you're using in your reactor. And so you want to protect yourself from both the heat and the radiation.
I just
So
put on a redstone activation cover.
that would be this redstone machine switch.
Yes. On this reactor on the top side. And I will connect it to the Geiger counter. And I need the screwdriver.
Oh, there you go. Oh, hold on. I didn't actually throw it. I threw it away. I hate when NEI does that. Let me get a new tip here and a stick. If anybody's ever tried to use a screwdriver tip without a handle, it does not work. Cannot get any leverage. Alright. There you go.
So we change the mode of the sensor. So it will output redstone if the neutron value is above what we set it. We'll let it go to a really high value because it's a breeder reactor. Breeder reactors actually benefit from going over the neutron maximum of rods because breeder rods absorb more neutrons if they get more neutrons. So if you give it 1,000 neutrons, it will not just get 1,000 neutrons, it will get extra neutrons absorbed based on how high the number is you give it. And that number scales exponentially. So you are really rewarded for having really huge neutron outputs on those breeder rods, into those breeder rods.
Now, don't forget to open your wire to your Geiger counter.
Yes. So
And for anybody that doesn't know already, the Geiger counter works just like any of your other sensor covers. And if you have any questions about that, there is a tutorial for the sensor covers as well. You can go and watch that to learn all the different settings and what they do and all the fun
just
things you can have with them.
need to invert the panel here, so it will be default on.
And you invert the cover just by smacking it with a screwdriver.
Yes.
You could also technically do it with putting a redstone torch on the wire, which would invert the signal coming from the wire rather than the signal from the or what the activator cover turns on and off at. Same thing, two different ways of doing it.
So now we got a super simple, super critical reactor. You see if the value goes
Yep,
over
it's turning off.
5,000.
It
So
goes up. It went just a little bit over 5,000, but it turned it off and went right back down.
Yes, it just turned off the one reflector rod, so it's not super critical anymore. But it doesn't lose all the neutrons. So now we can just place our breeder rod here. And when we activate that, it will get neutrons. You can see on the side.
Oh, okay.
It also rises because it gets strength from the ever-increasing supercritical rod. And it absorbs them to restore them, to transform it slowly into fuel rod.
And these thorium rods take that number where it says needed,
Yes,
which is 144 with 6 zeros after it.
it's a really high number, but that's not so important what that number is.
So about
After this,
144 million neutrons, if I'm correct.
yes, you can pull the rod out and see for yourself that it changed.
Okay, let's, if I learn how to jump here. My first day with these new feet. Oh yeah, see now it says needed is only 137,600,384. Okay. And now you said we can actually get power from this as well by putting something in the last reactor?
No, we are getting power from this already. The breeder rod produces a bit of power out of the neutrons that the normal fuel rod we use pushes onto it, but only half as much heat out of the neutrons. So from this, from the few thousand neutrons you see on the Geiger counter, you'll only get like 500 to 1000 heat units. So
So at
they,
an average of 1,500 neutrons, we're only going to get 750 heat out of it.
yes, but just
Okay.
from this one rod. The normal, the neutrons on the supercritical fuel rod, they just output one heat per neutron. So you get a lot of power out of it. But
Okay.
as the value we set is over the neutron maximum, we'll actually lose lose the durability faster. So it's not so efficient for using the fuel rod, but it's very efficient at breeding the fuel rod.
So when this thing is putting out the 5,000 that it turns off at, we're actually getting 5,000 heat
Yes,
at the same time. So out of this setup currently, we're getting an average of 5,750 heat units.
something like that.
Okay. So then our last reactor here is for.
For an absorber rod, we actually use this to automate the breeding process because as it will absorb neutrons, it will get full at some point, and it will turn directly into a fuel rod. And that would be very nice because it would probably keep make the reactor explode. We want to actually extract this rod when it actually turned into a fuel rod, and we use an absorber rod to detect when that happens, because when it turns into a fuel rod, it will start to output neutrons,
So
and
as it's a
that is
breeder,
different
it
from
won't put
inhibitors.
out any.
Yes, right now the breeder rod doesn't output any; it just takes them like an absorber rod. But at
Okay.
some point, it turns into a fuel rod and will start outputting. And when that
So
happens, we want to extract it.
okay. So with that, we can use a hopper
Yes.
set to redstone to turn it off and not pull anything out until it gets redstone from this Geiger counter that's saying,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm getting neutrons. That's an actual neat little setup there.
Yes. It's not. It's a bit of a complicated setup because the reactor itself has to be turned down to actually be able to interact with hoppers.
Hmm.
So you can't just pull out or put in reactor rod in when the reactor is on. You have to turn it down with redstone, and you have to time the hoppers so that first the item gets extracted, the extraction hopper gets disabled, and then the insertion hopper gets toggled on. So you don't have the fuel going through the reactor and the rods rapidly. And
Okay. And you're going to set that up now.
yes,
Okay. So that'll be the hopper that'll pull the fuel rod out when it turns into the fuel rod from the breeding. And the top one will insert a new one to continue the process.
so first we wanted to extract. So just do something like this. So it enables I will invert the redstone signal with a redstone torch here. So it will be kept from outputting if there is no redstone signal.
Okay.
Can you set the you have the no wait, I have the right way. If there's more than 0 neutrons, it will output a redstone signal.
Okay.
I need a machine switch right here, so we can turn the reactor off when that happens. Because of how GregTech's wires work. We will put a solid block here.
Okay.
So that's a repeater that's just making the redstone go one way. So when this block is powered by the inserting mechanism, it won't also power the hopper down here. Because Greg's wires are weird, I guess. This has to be a solid block and can't be a wire because the wire won't actually accept the redstone signal otherwise. Because it just won't connect to the peripherals on the redstone wire.
So basically, what you're doing is you're changing it from active redstone to passive redstone because the block will only send out a passive redstone signal where the redstone wire would send out an active redstone signal. The active one will
The
interact
redstone
with
wire,
adjacent blocks where the inactive only interacts with that block, if I remember correctly, with redstone.
I think you might be right. When I would put a wire here, it just won't connect to this repeater side. That's the
No,
problem.
it will not connect to the repeater side.
And that's why I have to use a solid block here. It will just get the value through the repeater and it will allow the machine to stop.
Okay.
Now, just build a little platform. Because when that happens,
And you're setting each one of those out to a 4-tick delay.
yes, so it will be 1 second delay.
Okay. Because that would be 4 times 5 would be 20, and that's how many ticks is in a second is 20. Very similar to what I did for automating steel with the new steel mechanic of needing air in a crucible.
Yes, crucibles generally are very similar in automation to reactors, because you also, instead of heat, you keep track of the neutron count and toggle it based on that. And so when there is power on this block, it will toggle the redstone. It will first toggle the hopper beneath and the reactor block. So the fuel rod will drop out, the active fuel rod. Then after a second, it will open this hopper up, so it will output into the reactor, and it should work.
Where is this redstone signal going now?
It's going here.
Well, it's not connected here.
Oh, yes. That can be fixed.
Okay. I was confused there for a second. Okay, so the redstone is coming in through here, getting a 1 second delay as it loops around the repeaters, and then when it comes back up here, it'll hit this 1 second later, which will insert another rod into the reactor.
What happens the second is when the reactor rod gets extracted, the signal will actually turn off because reactor rod is extracted, there is no power anymore. So this will continue, and then while this hopper is disabled, insert the rod.
Okay. So this is a basic supercritical breeder.
Yes. It could be automated even further, so the finished fuel rods would be inserted into this slot, and that's also possible. You would need to use robot arms for that, so you can actually target specific slots.
Yeah.
Or you would need to convert it to a pure 1x1 reactor, which is also possible.
And you'd also have to use a universal extender, which we never did talk about. So
Yes.
let's go ahead and talk about that now. Universal extenders will work with these reactors. So you can actually, here, I'll let you set this up. So you can actually control them via redstone and get the Geiger counter sensor off of a reactor from the extender without having to react with the reactor itself. You can do it through the extender. And extenders have two faces. They have a primary and a secondary. And you want the primary face facing the reactor, correct?
Yes. The primary phase is the phase that determines what block it actually extends, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
So it will now extend this reactor block with the breeder rod inside. So
Okay.
if we use the Geiger counter, we can actually measure the neutrons. Why doesn't this work? Is it rotated wrong way?
Let me look here.
This should work.
That's the secondary face. That's the primary face. Then you need... Oh, wait a minute. I think I know what your problem is here. This is the output of the coolant. So this needs to be the main face. This is turned off currently.
Ah, yeah. We turned it off.
So it's not doing anything.
Wait, we did something wrong, I think, because it should be default turned on. Messed up. Ah, yes, we forgot to configure the... I forgot to configure. Would you remove this red granite block, please? The
This one here?
cover underneath is in the wrong mode.
Ah, okay.
Now it will work.
Ah, there we go. Yep, now it's working.
And now the automation will also work.
Put that back so it's complete. And now you can see that we can actually read the Geiger counter off of the extender instead of off of the reactor itself. So you can still see what your output is, so you can monitor it, and then you can have your regular one here set to what you need to have it set to for your redstone over here.
You could also turn the put covers on the extender blocks.
Correct. And you can also
And
output and input fluid through your extender block.
yes, it's also possible. But you can't output or input items on the side extenders. If you place them, items can only be extracted and inserted from the top or the bottom. So if you had an extender on top, that would work. Put items in there and it would receive it, but not on the sides.
So it's extenders are good for redstone and fluid management, not for rod management.
Well, they also transmit neutrons. So
Yeah,
this reactor will actually get the neutrons, even though there's a extender in the middle.
right. It's
So there
basically
are
this reactor right here is the exact same position as if it was here where the extender is.
yes.
Okay.
So they
So,
are really useful for building reactors with finer controls and a lot of redstone and automation. because you can space out reactors by one. So you have a lot more space and a lot more sites.
Okay, so that is extenders for reactors and supercritical breeder reactor. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments or stop by our Discord. Link is in the description below. And again, as we said in the last one, if you need any information on these, there is a PDF written by Eric, who is the one that wrote this new code for the reactors, extending Greg's original code for the reactors. And it can be downloaded either through Greg's forums or from our Discord. And links for that is also below. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Don't forget to hit the buttons and do the things. See ya.